Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Teresa Friesen. I am the founder and CEO of SheMate, and we do virtual group mentoring by women in sports. And I am part of Scale Omaha. We're so glad to have you all here. And tonight we're here with Derek Hoffman. So let's give a round of applause first for that.
Derek Homann. Derek Homann.
Great. We're off to a really good start.
You can just call me Derek. We'll leave it there.
Okay, so Derek.
Yeah.
Well, what I wrote down here is Derek, so that's good. Thank you all for being here. What I shared earlier is that a lot of times what I like to do in these conversations is to do kind of the storytelling part of startups. And a lot of times that means like a history and a timeline of people's lives and what led to the startup experience. But what I want to do tonight, not that it's not that, but I really want to dig into the startup experience for you. And so my hope is that as everyone leaves here, that you kind of have a roadmap or insights into some of maybe the tips, secrets, experiences of what startup life is like and what maybe is most helpful and effective as we engage in this work. So with that being said, can you give us a little bit of insight into what startup has been for you? What does that look like? What has been your experience with that?
Yeah. So a little bit of background, but I was born and raised in Omaha, and I think since I was a kid, I always wanted to start my own company. But I think unlike some people, I started a little bit later. So I worked at a number of places before starting my own company. So I worked as an IT recruiter when I first came out of college. It was my first exposure to kind of tech, even in the smallest way. And then LinkedIn opened an office here in Omaha in 2007, and I started there in 2008. And I was really interested in tech, and then eventually wanted to start my own company. But I also didn't really have any skills, so that was not super helpful at that point. And so for me, like starting a company or startups in general were like trying to figure out how you take something that is nothing to start, like just nothing exists, and how do you actually just build something that people want to buy or that you can, when I was younger, I thought, starting a business was just like, oh, like you get to do whatever you want, whenever you want. And it's not really what it is, it turns out. And so, like, over the years, I think, I learned a little bit about what it meant to actually be part of a startup or start a startup through that experience. And I worked at LinkedIn for 8 years and saw some cool growth there. And then joined Flywheel in 2016 early on, and was closer to the starting point, but I was an employee there too. And I learned some stuff there, which was pretty interesting. And then myself and my partner, Ben, started a company called Median before, and that was our first real taste at what a startup was, and that was a little bit of a kick in the teeth. So I think that's like I think what my perception of what a startup was and that sort of thing, and what the reality was like very different. And so, I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with that, but I think a lot of it was like, all right, day one, like what do we do now? And I think that's so difficult to figure out, like what do you actually do and like how you build something that people want. And there's no one to tell you what to do. So it's like, it was like navigating that is really, really challenging. So.
Absolutely. So you already gave us a ton of things that we can dive into. So first, I would love for you to kind of expand on your interest in entrepreneurship and how that looked and felt versus what it really felt like. You kind of said like the interest versus the reality.
Yeah. So when we first started Median, our previous company, like I guess it was like I just kind of assumed that you're like, oh, I have like this pretty interesting background. I like feel like I like have some experience now. I feel like I know what I'm doing, and then day one you're kind of like, what are we building? Like you like kind of like think you're like smarter than you actually are, and so you go out there and you're like, the reality is like no one knows who you are on day one. You have like no credibility. You have no product, or if you even start building a product, it's like a really crappy version that's nowhere near as good as anything else that's out there. So like, you just like eat shit for a long time, and for a lot of people, like they just like don't ever not eat shit. Like it's really fucking hard. And so that the reality was that like it's just really hard for a long time, and sometimes it like never actually gets easier. And I think there's just like different challenges and that sort of thing. But like I think day one, it was like it's like I guess Ben is a technical person, and so he's building the product. I'm like, well, I guess that means I'm selling it, and I'm like not a salesperson. Like I didn't come from a sales background. So every day I'm like writing cold emails, like trying to like work on like partnerships with people. Like no one knows who you are. It's like two guys in like a closet in like the AIM building over here, and it's like. And so the reality was like, oh, I just like got myself a really, really extremely low paying job. And actually it wasn't low paying. We didn't pay ourselves at all. So that was actually worse. And so that was like the reality. It was like, you just like kind of take, you get humbled a bit, and then you just like have to work on like everything to just like get it off the ground. And a lot of times you just don't get off the ground. But we were lucky enough to be around long enough for some good luck to happen. But that was the reality. Is like the first part really sucks. It's really challenging.
So I think we should talk about that. But before we do, can you tell us more about what Median is, how you got there, and I'm going to say where it ended or where it ended up?
Yeah. So when Ben and I left Flywheel to start Median was a co-browsing company. And for most people wouldn't know what that is, but it allows two or more people to view and interact with the same web page at the same time. So I came from a customer support background, and I ran customer support teams. And oftentimes one of the challenges that people would have is trying to understand what the customer is seeing or doing on a website or an app or whatever. And co-browsing was this kind of interesting way to be able to do that without having to require them to jump on a Zoom meeting or do anything else. You could just click a button and immediately see what the person is doing on your website or app in real time. So you're like literally like looking over the shoulder of what they're doing. So my background was in customer support. I knew there was some need for that. And so when Ben and I started working together on that, we focused on building out originally a different product and narrowed it in on that very specific thing, because it was a kind of a niche product. We were a bootstrapped company. We didn't raise any money. And so we were focused on building that piece of it and then trying to partner with others who were building either live chat products or contact center products, so we could add that as a feature into their existing like product line. And so yeah, that's what that product was. And it was mostly come from a need of like what I had seen as a challenge, like to try and provide good customer support. But we did that for 3.5 years, and I think the first good chunk of that was just trying to get a few customers here and there. We kind of pivoted our strategy to go to that more white label version, but that came directly out of like a need that I think I saw from just leading those sorts of teams.
One of the things that I think a lot of us experience in the startup world is that there's this real life need that exists that we see ourselves, and then we think, hey, maybe if I create the solution, this is something that I could pursue as kind of a startup business. And you said at the very beginning, like one of the things you have to think about is what people want and need to buy. So can you talk about a little bit about like where that idea happened and to the progression of like getting those first customers and figuring out your pricing point and how to like figure out who you're actually selling to, especially because you mentioned you're not really into sales, but like you got into that role.
Yeah. So we were trying to sell it. I mean, to me, I was the director of support at Flywheel. I was like, I'm trying to sell to people who are running support teams at various technology companies specifically. And mostly because they have an online presence, the thing that they're trying to support is something that is like a website that is online, and that's how our product would work. So we went specifically down that path of trying to build a product for those people and sell directly to those people. So I would literally go on LinkedIn every day and be like, director of support, search, and then just go through and just try and find their email address, email them and be like, hey, I am a former director of support myself, and here's what we're building. I think it could be of use for you. Like, are you interested? And we got most people just didn't respond at all. Like a lot of people didn't respond ever. And so that was mostly just trying to build for that and trying to sell to the ideal customer profile was who I was. And so we went down that path of just trying to like individually knock on the doors of those people that were in those roles, or get introductions to people that were in those roles and that sort of thing. And, eventually you get a number of customers if you just like keep trying long enough. But like at that point, like you mentioned pricing. It was like, we didn't know how to price it. Like we priced it way too low. It was like we were charging like $10 a month. I was telling somebody the story earlier, but like at one point I got on a 30-minute demo to demo somebody, and then I think I pulled Ben into the demo at one point, and at the end they were like, $10 a month is like too expensive. Could you do like $5 a month? They were like, what are we doing here? And then eventually we raised our prices, and then we sold the same amount of stuff, but it was for like 5 times more. And like, I would just like do more of that, and then the customers were less challenging to deal with because they actually saw the need for it, rather than people who were like really finicky on price. And but pricing stuff is hard too. So it's like we have this challenge today. Like every time we get out of a meeting, it feels like it's like, should we just like charge more? And the answer is like always yes. So I think it is easy to. Was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how like founders like notoriously undercharge for their products, and it's certainly true. So, but I certainly knew there was like a need for what we were building, or at least some narrow subset of that, and then eventually you try and price it correctly and get in the hands of some people, and they get feedback on it. That's the most important thing. Is like getting somebody to actually pay for something you built, and then start to get feedback on it and iterate on it is really the most important thing. It's like getting somebody to actually just use the thing is really hard, but is really useful.
So you were gaining this idea because of your job. Fast forward, you had something to sell, and you were doing this kind of cold outreach to sell. Tell us about that interim. So where did you build that product? At what point did you start those kind of customer interviews or inquiries?
Yeah, we never did like formal customer interviews, and I'm not the biggest fan of like doing like surveys or interviews for stuff, because I think like everyone is like really nice and they'll just tell you they would like buy your stuff, and then when you like have something that's worth buying and you put it in front of them, you're like, all right, here's that thing you said you would buy, and then like they don't give you money, and you're like, well, I thought you were gonna give us money. And then so that's when you really find out. And so but from day one we were just trying to do like sales from day one, and same thing with our current company Workshop. We were trying to sell the thing day one, and so we would do mock-ups or like even like fake stuff to say like, if this were a real product, would you buy this? And then actually ask for money for it, and then usually just get told no. Eventually you get a little bit better at it, but yeah, I mean that's like the thing is we just did that for literally 3.5 years. It was like just repeating that same process over and over, and then eventually we're like, it seems like not a lot of people are like buying this. Maybe we should try a different strategy, and so we went a different route where we're like, instead of selling directly to the directors of customer support at various companies, like what if we approached the technology providers they have for their live chat products or their contact center products, and we know this is a really interesting piece of technology to build. It's pretty hard to build, and so what if we were able to go to them and say, hey, we can offer a piece of technology that would take you a long time to build. You can just white label it, put it right into your product, and then immediately your product becomes more valuable because now you have more products and features to be able to sell to them. Would that be interesting to you? So the primary buyer ended up not becoming the director of customer support. It became, whoever the product manager is at like a contact center company, like a Zendesk or like a like livechat.com or Intercom or those sorts of things. So we kind of went down that path instead, just because we weren't seeing a lot of success selling directly to like those customer support folks. And a lot of times they didn't have budget for anything, and like they weren't the decision maker. They could pull out a credit card and swipe it. So we had to pivot go to that kind of white label purchase, because we spent however many years not selling stuff constantly.
I was going to say, so you mentioned 3.5 years
Yep.
where there wasn't kind of enough revenue or income flow. And at that point then you decide to kind of take this next direction or think about different options. I think that's really interesting. I would love to hear more about that. I think that a lot of times, in the startup realm, there's kind of this like, you become a unicorn or you're obsolete. And so I think this is a really interesting part to discuss, and I think it's relevant for a lot of people, and I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So like I would say there's a lot of things that we did wrong, and like the one thing we did right was we stayed alive long enough for something like halfway decent to happen. And so, and we kept trying different things, and like we're building a product at the end too that we were also like interested in pursuing. But for us, it was like a lot of the same stuff. We're trying to be like repeat what we were doing. If you got one customer, you try and figure out like, how you got them. Like, you know, we were like optimists, so we're like, oh, like, you know, there's some interesting partnerships conversations we're having. Like, we're really close. And in reality, like, we weren't close. Like, it just felt like we were. And so, but we got a couple. And so, like, enough to the point where, like, well, it's not worth nothing. And the technology is interesting. But if we're being like real critical on it, like, it wasn't a good business. We probably should have closed up shop and like moved on to the next thing a while ago. And so I think a little bit of it, like looking back in like hindsight, is like we probably have the ability to know that it actually wasn't working, and we would go back and pivot earlier, or just start a completely new company, or just be real honest with ourselves. We benefited from this a little bit at our current company, Workshop. Like, we had a really tough first year, but we kind of knew what product market fit felt like. And when you weren't there, we were like, we're not going to spend 2 years doing this. We're going to be like, this isn't working. I don't know if this next thing we're going to do is going to work, but we're not going to keep doing this. So I think that was the biggest thing, was like, it probably wasn't a great business in general. And like looking back, like it would have been better for us to like do something else. But I do think we had something that was worth nothing. And eventually we just were like, how do we make something out of this? And so eventually we got to the point where we're like, this is interesting technology. There are some customers that we have that use this. You know, what would it look like if we were to like sell off these assets and potentially use it to fund working on a new thing? And then through some of those discussions, it ended up evolving to the point where we were able to have a pretty nice little exit for us. But like along the way, like we didn't pay ourselves for a year and a half. And then when we did, we were paying ourselves basically minimum wage. And then only at the end was it ever like anything that made any financial sense for us at all. But not because it was a good business. It was like we actually kind of salvaged the thing at the very end. And that, like, so like if you were like really asking, I was like, it's like kind of ended up being like a success, and like made some more money at the end than I had before, which is great. But we got kind of lucky at that. Like, I think we tried to put ourselves in the right position for that to happen, but it was a good time, like good amount of time of just like banging our heads against the wall and just being like, well, like, you know, maybe we'll make $500 more next month than we did this month. And we were like, and sometimes we did that. But the reality is like, it was a lot of time, like just walking through the desert. It's like, and then eventually we got to the point where we're like, had some interesting conversations pop up where we're like, maybe we should pursue this. This is like interesting, kind of burn out a little bit, like of just, you know, every single month not selling more than the previous month and like being flat for what felt like a million years in a row. So that was a challenging thing. But like, I think the one thing we did right was at the end, we kind of like salvaged the whole thing and like figured out a good place to land. And we ended up doing this kind of really interesting transaction scenario where we kind of like sold the company in like 3 times, where we had an existing customer who ended up buying this non-exclusive perpetual license to the company for like 25 times what their annual contract was with us, which was awesome. And then we sold some of our technology to another household name that you would know. Kind of luckily enough, I happened to know somebody there. We were exploring the option of selling the company, and I reached out to him because he was in the industry, and I said, hey, who else should we talk to about this? Like, if we're looking to find a landing spot. And he actually was like, well, you should talk to us. And that surprised me. And so we went down that path. We ended up working at that company for a number of months, implementing our own software, which is pretty cool. And then we had this kind of weird thing where we still actually owned all of our customer contracts. Only the technology had been kind of sold to those other companies, but in this weird non-exclusive way. Way too long of a story for this. But and then so we still had all these customer contracts and some of the technology that we still had rights to. And so we ended up selling the remainder of that on what was microacquire.com at that point. Now it's acquire.com to an independent buyer who buys SaaS businesses, so that sort of thing. So in the end, it kind of ended up being like a pretty cool outcome for us. But but along the way, it like kind of sucked. Other than like working with Ben and meeting him and like going through the trenches with him, but like he made the joke the other day a couple months ago, that he's like, I really liked working with you, but it was like not fun, and it was like a good example. And I would totally agree, because it's like we really enjoy working with each other, but it was just like getting punched every day. And it was like, but we made the best of it. So, and also we're optimistic people. We're like, oh, figure it out. And so like you got to a point where you like figured something out. It like worked out okay.
Okay, so these things that you're saying right now, earlier you said, and I quote, it's just really fucking hard. Mm-hmm. So this median experience, how does that compare or differ from other startup experiences that you're having? Is it all always really fucking hard? Or what can a startup do to make it both, progressing toward these kind of outcomes that you're hoping to achieve, this kind of end goal that you might have, and knowing you're kind of in the trenches and getting there?
Yeah. I feel like I know now better than before that like momentum is like a huge thing. And just like having momentum where you feel like you're moving forward, you're making progress, it's like tangible and it's real and it's consistent, was the most important thing to like feel that. Like I think like at Workshop, for example, when we started the company, we spent a year not making progress in terms of customers. We were kind of like building a product that was really difficult. I think we went through 6 months where we didn't have one customer sign up even there, and like and my partner Rick is sitting over here, and when we launched, Dusty helped us get this off the ground too, and they obviously had some really nice successes from Flywheel, and we thought we were going to have it a little bit easier than we did to start with, but we kind of knew this, like we just didn't have momentum. You weren't getting customers. You had feedback that was like, we like some of the stuff, but like it's not quite what you wanted. And then I will say that kind of at that year mark, we finally got to the point where we iterated on the product where we're doing sales calls. People were like, we got a couple of people to start buying. We're like, I remember the current version of the product of what we sell today, we went 6 straight months with nobody buying anything. And then, and we had a couple of customers that we like pre-sold and like were using our existing product. And then we were, I don't know, like smart enough is the right word, but like observant enough to know that like that wasn't working, so we got to figure out something else. And so we kind of pivoted and got more directionally corrected what we were doing. And then we sold 6 customers in 1 month, which at that point to us was like a crazy amount. And they were paying like small amounts, but we didn't have 6 customers. Like we had like six customers total before that. And so we got to the point where we're like, all right, there's some momentum there. And then the next month we did it again. And then you did it again. And you're like, all right, there's something here. Like you feel like you're able to replicate stuff. And like once it starts becoming a little bit repeatable, and it feels like you're getting yeses at like a higher rate than you were before, like is kind of when it felt like it was, I wouldn't say easier, but like it was like, it wasn't harder. I mean, it's like when people finally start paying you money, it's like at least easier in some way. And so that was like the biggest thing, was like that was like recognizing when you have momentum and when you don't was like the biggest learning on the planet. It's like not having momentum only becomes apparent once you feel that you have momentum. And especially when you're like a bunch of optimistic people who are like, oh, we'll figure it out and that sort of thing. Like, and momentum can be revenue. It can be progress on the product. It can be a bunch of different stuff. But like when you're moving in the right direction and it like feels like things are clicking, it's just way different than when it's not. And so I don't know how to describe it other than like momentum is the key, at least for like the types of companies that we sign up for, which is like you raise funding, like it's a SaaS company, so it's like there's a snowball effect, like you are hopefully bigger every month than you were the previous month. So momentum is the key. And it's like, and that comes with hiring, that comes with product, everything.
Yeah. So it's not that any of it is easy, it's all hard, but also when you have these kind of tangible demonstrations that you have this momentum and you can keep going, it's kind of the difference for you in a startup being painfully hard versus like appropriately hard.
Yeah, I would say that. It's like the nice thing about having momentum is like it's never not hard, but like it feels easier to see like what's on the other side of that, which is like, yeah, this is really going to suck. Like if you're going to add a bunch of employees, or like you're like, we have to rebuild our app because of tech debt or whatever, you're like, but I see on the other side of that, because of momentum that we have, that like you're getting something for that, at least in some way. Like you never really know, it's always kind of fuzzy, but having the momentum makes you feel like, yeah, this stuff is hard, all this stuff is hard, but like I at least can see on the other side of that, and it's motivating. Whereas not having momentum and continuing to work on stuff, you're just like, I hope that's going to work. And like it's like hoping for a really long time gets really exhausting.
Yeah.
Hoping without having results gets exhausting. And then if you are optimistic and you hope and you are seeing results, that's like invigorating. You want to keep doing that. You want to double down on it. You're like, shit, I want to work even more because like I'm seeing the fruits of my labor. Yeah. So that's what I would say. I mean, like, I don't know, like feeling momentum is like the biggest thing that I don't feel like I felt before until the very end of Median, and now feeling that at Workshop is like, oh, you should have been looking for that the whole time. Like, and if you didn't feel that, we got to do something else.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about your what that looked like from to getting started with Workshop and then to where you are now?
Yeah. So right before the pandemic is when Ben and I sold Median. And then Rick and the Flywheel team sold roughly the similar timing, and then we both had kind of like other priorities and things. Like we had to implement our product at the acquiring company, and they were making sure there was a smooth transition for the team there. But after that, we were kind of looking for the next thing to do, and Ben and I really enjoyed working with each other, and and Rick we always kept in touch with after we left. Like I remember literally like telling Rick I was like putting in my notice because we were going to start a company, and he was like, he was mad for like 15 seconds, and then he was asking, he was like, "Can I see the product?" And then and then like they were our first customer after that too, which was cool to see the support. And then Ben and I started noodling on a new idea because we're like, all right, like what are we gonna do now? Like get regular jobs? No. And so we started thinking about an idea, and then I texted Rick. And I was like, Ben and I are working on this thing, and he was like, hey, if you like Rick's a designer by trade, so he's like, if you want any like free design work done, that I want to get my hands dirty again. And like Rick's running like an entire product org at WP Engine, which is like large, and he was like, and clearly like just like working with us is way more fun. And so he was like, yeah, I'll do free work, and like neither Ben nor I are designers, so we're like, yeah, we'll take you up on that. And then there's like pandemic stuff's going on and whatever, and so we started just kind of jamming on this idea, and we had a couple different ideas that we worked on. Like we built had mock-ups for like a meeting notes agenda app, which I'm glad we didn't do that, and then some other stuff. But it mostly went from that, which is like we enjoyed being around each other, we like working with each other. And like what's an interesting thing that we want to solve together. And like I said this before, but like in some ways, like I think there are certain people who are like, I was born to solve this problem. And I think at least for me personally, starting a startup with people that you enjoy being around is just like I don't even care what the startup is, like in some ways. So like it's just like an excuse to like work on stuff with like hard problems with your friends. And so that was that's what we did. And then, and so we started the company. We raised some money out of the gate, mostly off of Rick and Dusty's resumes from Flywheel, which was really helpful because, again, for the first year, we struggled a bit finding product market fit, but that gave us runway to figure it out. And then we also hired on Jamie Bell and Jess Spengler, who we had worked with previously at Flywheel. They started with us day one, February 1st, 2021. This is the day we started. And then we started building out a team, started building out a product. Again, first year kind of navigating to figure out what product people actually want to buy, getting feedback on it, getting in the hands of those folks. And then kind of late 2021, early 2022, we landed on the product that we have now that started seeing real traction. We were able to raise some additional funds, continue to build out the team, and then and so that we fast forward now, and I think we're 51 employees, and we've raised $20 million of funding, and we're just, continuing to build out products that solve problems for our customers. And it's still really fucking hard. It turns out it's like still really hard. It's just hard in a different way. It's like at this point, you don't doubt that there are people willing to buy the thing you're building. And now it's like hiring's hard, and like all the organizational stuff is hard, and like building out the right team is like probably the hardest thing. And we'll say our team is really like hands down is like the best team I've ever worked with at like this scale. But like trying to keep that at 200 employees or 2,000 employees or whatever is just gonna be really difficult. Like it's never not gonna be hard. It's just different hard. So that's the path anyway. That's where we went after Median and where we're at today, I guess.
Yeah. And I want to say you're now on the side of a bus.
We do. Yeah, we wrapped a bus. And it was like, my son actually asked me, he's like, I don't feel like that's a good use of money. And I was like, well, it's mostly like for like awareness, and like we're like trying to build a team and recruiting and things like that. I'm like, I don't think anyone's gonna like see a bus drive by with a workshop logo on it and like become a customer. But if they do, that would be sick. But I don't think that's gonna happen. But maybe there are enough companies in Omaha that like follow in our target demographic that maybe we can attribute like direct ROI to that. But there is a decent amount of that, which is like doing things like that are interesting or fun or different that just like help us stand out, whether it comes to employer brand, and just like having like excuses for people to like talk about what we're doing. And buses aren't as expensive as you would think, apparently, as well. So turns out it's like not a bad strategy, actually.
And can you share what you have a pretty cool Omaha stat on there about workshop?
It's the stat. The Omaha's fastest growing startup.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So we got a long way to go.
Well, it's a great accomplishment, a great milestone. We are very soon going to get into questions from everyone, so if you have any, make sure that you are ready to share that. We would love to open that up. Before we do, I want to just kind of talk about like that entrepreneurial bug that exists. I think that's what happens with a lot of people in this space. We all kind of have that feel, that pull. So you talked about how you've kind of always had that. You had that interest, but you kind of got into regular 9-to-5 jobs. But then you talked about how like you got into Flywheel, you got into Median, and then you said like, what are we going to do? Have regular jobs? No. And everyone laughed because like we get that, right? So can you talk a little bit more about kind of that entrepreneurial spirit? You mentioned like a group of friends coming together and thinking about interesting things to solve. And I think a lot of people here can really resonate with that. So can you just kind of expand on that, and then we'll open it up to everyone?
Yeah. So like it's like, I don't know how to describe it because that's just like the way I've been, but like I was 34 when I first started the company, and I'm 10 years older than Ben. I'm 5 or 6 years older than Rick, and like I don't think Rick's ever had a real job. It's like I had real jobs beforehand, but again, I didn't have any skills, so I had to learn how to do something. And so like for me, I thought it was important to like figure out like I could contribute in some way, especially as I like got a little bit older. It was like, all right, if I were to start a company, like how do I even like feel like this could even potentially be successful? And I'm like, I think I was at least self-aware enough at like 21 to be like, I don't know how to do anything. So it's probably not a good time to start a company, but I do want to do it. And I was always interested in it. And like, there were always kind of like projects I would try and like convince other folks I work with that were like software engineers or whatever to like work on with me. And like there was like a lot of like little like side projects and stuff that we did. But it was like, and I was always kind of like, I actually think I was like a relatively decent employee, but I always kind of like didn't like it. And I didn't like being an employee, mostly because like, not even because like I thought I could do better. It's just like I just didn't like it. And I like, but I was never sure if I was gonna like start a company because I felt like I needed someone that I would work with that would be complementary to what I was doing, and also like it sounded not fun to do it by yourself. And then like someone who was like willing to like match like the risks I was willing to take. Like I was making really good money. Like my last year at LinkedIn, and we had gone public, and like and so I was just, like doing great personally, and then I was like, the reason I even went to work at Flywheel was like I just wanted to be exposed to what was happening in an earlier stage and be closer to that, because like that's always what I wanted to do. I think I literally said in my interview, like, after this I want to start a company, or like I want to be more close to the start, because like even when I started at LinkedIn, we were a couple hundred employees or so, and then at Flywheel it was like 30 employees, and so I didn't learn, like I wasn't at the board meeting, but like I got to be like around other interesting things that were happening, and I learned a lot from that experience. And so it was mostly just like I was always willing to have literally zero salary, and then we did. Like again, for the first year and a half, we didn't pay ourselves at all. It was just money going out of our accounts and not into our accounts, especially because we didn't sell anything. And so but I was like, I'm willing to do that, but if I want to work with other people on this, like, are those other people willing to do that? And like, I remember like being super worried all the time that I was like, dude, Ben's gonna leave, he's gonna get a real job, he can get paid so much elsewhere, and like whatever. And I was like, I know I'm willing to risk this, and like feeling like having the trust level in other people was always like challenging for me to figure that out. Now I know Ben will definitely take the risk. I was just like, I didn't like working for other people, and I liked working with other people on things that I was interested in, or I cared about, or I felt like I could have real influence on. And so that's why starting the company was always interesting. But like, I just never liked working. Like even when I was doing well, I just didn't like. I enjoyed my experiences there. Like I worked at LinkedIn for 8 years, but it was good enough for a while. But I mean, if it didn't work out, I probably would have just went back to get a real job. But now I can't. Now I'm like unemployable.
I think some people would disagree, but I appreciate that perspective. Yeah. I want to open it up to the room. I think that a lot of people have a lot of kind of curiosity and interest in hearing about what you want to say. Yeah.
First of all, Derek, great work. You didn't master book value. And then, so it's like the theme of the talk to me was like momentum. It's like with momentum, you do everything. Without it, you're screwed. It said, then I heard it's like, okay, for the first year, you guys had no momentum. And then like something changed. You got 6 new clients that you had momentum from there out. So my question is like, what happened in that 1 month? We went from like no momentum to.
Well, I mean, that was going from no momentum to momentum was the willingness to like just throw stuff away that wasn't working. So like, if you looked at like our marketing website, the copy completely changed on it. It got simplified. The product was completely different. So like, our product team like rebuilt our entire product in 6 weeks. So like, it was a completely new product. Messaging changed, and the momentum was around that. It was like building something that people wanted, and then also being able to communicate what the thing was. So like when people saw it on the website or heard about it or whatever, they'd be like, oh, that clicks with me, like that was interesting. But the messaging and the product were just not what people wanted before that. And so the willingness to throw that stuff away and just like almost tell our early customers, we eventually did tell our early customers, like, hey, the thing you bought, like, I know you want to keep paying us, but like you can't, like we're literally shutting it down, was like a thing we just like had to do to like get to the point where like we could be like a real company. So it was all just about refocusing the company around the marketing message and the product. So the reason we got 6 customers in that month when having 0 before that was just because we rebuilt the product and marketed it in a way that was more simple and was what they were actually looking to solve, rather than what we thought they were looking to solve and what we thought they wanted. And a lot of that was just feedback that we got from sales calls and that sort of thing. We were super diligent about sharing all of our notes from every sales call in Slack afterwards. This is what people liked. This is not what people liked, or what people didn't like, or whatever. And then eventually we got there, and so we had at that point we're like, wow, like our close rate was basically 0 before, and now it's like more than 0. So something's working. So we just kept going that way. So it was just all about that. It was like, but we did that once before too. Like we pivoted the product before, and we still had 0 sales, and we still had, and we changed the marketing a little bit too, and that didn't work. So like we did it again, to that point. So it was like we went with this intranet product for like 6-7 months, didn't work out very well. And then we had another 2 or 3 months of this like other kind of like in between product that also didn't work. And then we got to that point where the new product and the new more like simplified messaging like just resonated with people. And so we're like, well, let's double down on that.
Oh yeah, just like to follow up, it's like, it sounds to me like, oh, we just did like a completely new product and like a completely different messaging. Like, so was like a completely different new company or like? It
was not a completely new product. It was not completely new messaging. I would say even our intranet product, our original product, was always communications focused. And that was kind of like our differentiator from day one. So we were kind of like pointed roughly in the right direction. And then if we're being like oversimplistic, like we actually just kind of like cut off all the pieces that people didn't like and we only focused on this messaging piece. And then eventually we got to the point where like, instead of people having to log into our app to get messages, we were like, what if we just used our product to like build and send and analyze emails, a channel that every company uses everywhere, ever, like forever. And that's actually like when it actually started turning the corner. So it was always around communications, and it was mostly just like narrowing in on it. Like if you ask any company that's like a larger company, like, do you have problems with like communicating with employees? Like if you did an employee satisfaction survey, any company of any size, like the number one thing that always comes up of what they can improve upon is communication. So you're like, all right, like there's something there. And then how you solve for that is just different depending on what the companies are and the size and like what tools they use. So it was mostly just narrowing that in and kind of like directionally getting pointed in the right direction. Because again, like we were like, communications, right? We need to solve that. And then we're like, well, not all communications are not that way, but these companies do it in this very specific way and they have challenges with that. So like, let's kind of point our focus towards that. And then eventually that's when started really seeing some real traction.
Investors tend to like second-hand founders because they know what that in the later. They how they bang at it against the wall for to understand it. Do you think you can do it faster now? Like, is your ability to understand the right signals significantly faster?
Like if we were to start like another company, like if we were to start from scratch, like today.
Maybe it's a new product or something like that. Then you feel confident in not knowing obviously what's going to happen, but knowing if it's working or not.
Yeah. Oh, I think 100% you'd be able to tell faster. Like with our experience today, like you'd definitely be able to tell faster. Like I think realistically, I don't want to do it again because like this thing's working. You're gonna double down on it, and like I didn't have hair before the company started, so I definitely so it's like this is like the thing. This is like we're riding off into the sunset after this bad boy. But but yes, like 100%. Like if you were gonna do it again, like I feel if you've done it once, the second time you're like, all right, it feels like it's better than before, or it feels like it's worse. Like that's definitely a sign. But having something to compare it to, like in like every day, is like is really helpful. And having nothing to compare it to, like I think like, gosh, I didn't even know like what like I should like what a good target like adding revenue would be every month, or like how many demos should we even be having, or like whatever. Like had no concept of that other than like try to get some, like try and get more than you had before. But even like just kind of like it's like when like I don't know, probably the first time somebody broke a 4-minute mile, all of a sudden a bunch of people did it afterwards because you're like you just knew what it was and what it felt like, or that it was possible. And so I feel like that's kind of what it's like. I mean, I'm not running a 4-minute mile, but like people do. And but so it's like that, which is like I don't know anything other than I'm like I feel like you'd be able to feel faster like if things are working or not. And so like rolling out even like a second product at the same company, I think that's like useful there too, to be like, oh, like the second product's not catching on as fast or whatever. Like that's useful too. So I would agree that it is helpful, but
So then
there's a lot of
expand on that a little bit. So then all of us who are first-time founders who are doing this for the first time or approaching investors for the first time, what kind of insights or advice can you give to first-timers in being able to kind of like figure it out faster and better?
Yeah. I think like it's like just like being real honest with yourself, like setting goals. Like if you can show that you can set goals and hit them, like because no one like if you're going to investors or to like customers or whatever, like no one cares what your excuse. Like it sounds like harsh, but like no one cares what your excuse is. Like if you're an investor, they're like, is this person going to make me money? Like, and for better or worse, like if you're a second time founder and you made investors money the first time around, like that's like some street cred that you have. Like you have that on your resume. If you're you're an 18-year-old kid who just graduated high school and you're trying to start a startup, like an investor is probably going to be like, all right, show me that you can build a product. Show me that you can make $1 of revenue at least, like probably a lot more than that. Actually, they probably are like, I need like some proof. Whereas like if you've done it before and you sold a company for $5 billion, like you're going to get a check on day one, proving nothing on the second company. So I think that's the thing is like, you just need to like, consistently show that you're able to achieve goals, and no one cares what your excuse is. Like if their job is to invest in a company and make money, like that's what they care about. And they're like, there's a million different people who want money from them. And so you're like, how do you de-risk it as much as possible for them, knowing that it's a risky thing in general. So like having momentum, showing that you can do that stuff is important. And also like most of them will still say no. So I think that's like the important thing. And like, but regardless of investors, like I think it's like important for you just, if you're starting a company to like figure out what momentum means for you and then like do it and then be honest with yourself. If you're not like, it's not, and for most people, it's not going to be for lack of trying that like, if it doesn't work out, like there could be a million reasons that things didn't work out as a bad market, or you didn't have, the right partner, or you needed funding and you couldn't get it, but you couldn't convince people to do it. There's a chicken and the egg problem, like, and it sucks, but like that's your job as an entrepreneur, is to like figure out problems, and sometimes there's like not a good solution, but like no one cares. You still got to figure it out, and sometimes it's easier for certain people. You're like, that's really annoying when this person over here gets funding and like they have no street cred, but I have tons of street cred and I've done all these things and I still can't get funding. It's like, it sucks. And I don't know what to tell you, but like, no one, like, you still got to figure it out. Like if you make money, if you figure out a way to make money and show how to make money repeatedly, somebody will fund you eventually. But you got to get there.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's a lot of what Scale is, especially Omaha and startups. We all talk about how, the Nebraska as a startup ecosystem, we're doing great right now, but it hasn't always been the case. We've historically not been so great about building and supporting startups. And I think this is really key of what like Scale and other networking groups can really do. If there's not a lot, statistically here compared to in other locations, it's hard to see like, okay, what is it that investors want, or how do you build that momentum, or what does proof look like? And so kind of sharing like tips and tricks and secrets, sharing that out here for all of us to access, I think is really, really helpful. So I appreciate everything that you're sharing, and I just had to interject that. Oh, lots of more questions. Jake.
Put a ton of weight on getting funding and like having the amount of money in the bank. You mentioned that you had an easier time raising money this time around. How did that expedite you or help you get to being the fastest growing startup?
So like we didn't raise any funding for the previous company. So this is the first time I had been part of a founding team that had raised money, even though the companies I worked at previously had raised money. Honestly, if you could do it without raising money, that's even better. Like you own 100% of the company, like you have nobody to answer to, like somebody wants to offer you $10 million tomorrow to sell your company, you could take it and all of a sudden you have that $10 million is yours. And you don't have to split it up at all. That's pretty sweet. So like, I think like funding is only helpful if it like helps you go where you're trying, or like get where you're trying to go faster. And because like there is a trade-off. Like if you are like, all right, we're going to take on this funding, that means I own less of the company. It means all of our employees own less of the company and all that stuff. So like, I actually think that fundraising is like a milestone thing. It's like potentially a positive milestone where you're like, it shows that someone out there believes that your company is going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today. But like, it's not actually like, other than like having, like feeling nice about some external validation, it's probably like not actually as cool a milestone as most people think it is. The cool milestone is that you like signed up 10 more customers than you did last month. And then the next month you sign up 20 more or whatever. Like the only, like funding doesn't matter at all if you don't build a good business. Like there's tons of companies right now that have a shit ton of funding and they're worth $1 billion on paper. And then you look at them now and you're like, there's a number of companies right now that were like $1 billion companies a year ago and are like, don't exist today. Yeah. So it's like, if anything, it's like, if you're taking on money, like you better feel pretty confident that you can like live up to it. And in a lot of ways, if you can make it work without funding, that's even better. It just is going to be probably slower to go. But like if you're building a software company that's has recurring revenue, it is a snowball effect. So in theory, like if you can wait it out, if you can go a long time without paying yourself a salary, or if you can go a long time with a really lean team, it's probably the better way to go. But also like the reality is like, you want to hire employees day one who are going to help you get there. Like hire Jess on day one as a salesperson to sell a product that didn't really exist. You're like, probably wants to get paid at least something if you're going to convince him to come work there. So funding helps with some of that stuff, but like in an ideal scenario, it's like not. You don't get funded, and you just like build a successful business there. Like it was a MailChimp sold for like $12 billion and they never took $1 of outside funding. Like that's pretty sweet. So like the best thing you can do is build a good business. Like who cares about the funding thing?
Okay, so I think we will get to people who have their hands up, but that will probably be it for our timing, just to give a little warning. Yeah.
Just somewhat, I'm not sure if we can answer, but you talk a lot about pivoting, and I'm under the assumption that when we first are in the startup, you were wanted to pivot because you don't have the experience, and you have a lot of like time, learning, energy investment in what they're trying to do, and you think they got do they can live, maybe they don't, be not sure. And what are getting to you is like opti-type pivoting is the right move. Kind of wondering if we've got more couple of pivoting, and if that's true. How do you make yourself uncomfortable with pivoting? Is it just something where you do it and you say that friend to succeed, or
something along those lines?
Yeah. I think part of the pivoting thing is like, it was like, me and it was like not good at coming up with good ideas the first time apparently. So you have to pivot. Like better idea would be just like come up with a good idea the first time and execute on it. Just like keep doing that. And so ideally you don't have to pivot, but like the reality, like when reality sets in, you're like, this thing's not working. Like you just need to. And so I think it is really difficult. Even knowing now that like feeling like the momentum, really matters. Like you're like momentum really matters. Like you can tell yourself that all day, but like it sucks to like spend a bunch of time and effort on a thing and just throw it all away. Like it feels like if you wrote 10,000 lines of code, or you wrote like, you have all these like leads that you captured from somewhere for this product that exists or whatever. And then you're like, the reality is like, if it's not working, it feels like you just spent a ton of time and effort only to throw it away. But the reality is if you don't do that and the thing's not working, then you're just going to be posed anyway. Cause like, it doesn't matter. Like, again, no one cares like, that you put in 10,000 hours building this thing if no one wants to buy it. And so you got to be comfortable with the pivoting if necessary. Ideally, you don't have to, but you don't. Like it's a gut feeling at a certain point. Like I don't think there's a way to know specifically when to pivot. I'm sure there are some people who have like some framework out there that like know whatever, but I'm like, I don't know. Like at a certain point, you're like, well, we spent 6 months doing this, not one person bought. That's probably a good indicator that maybe we should pivot. But then again, we did that with Median, and we did way longer than 6 months, and then we still didn't pivot for a long time. So So we at least had that. But you also have to give things enough time to work out too. So like it's different for everything. If you're building a medical device company versus a software company, it's different. So I don't know if there's a great way to know when to pivot, but like you do feel like you have a gut feeling over a period of time that like, I don't know, in reality is 6 months enough time to know if this thing is working or not? And it may not be if it's like a really challenging technical problem and you have to kind of build in a silo or whatever. But I don't have a great answer for like knowing when to pivot other than like you got to kind of use your gut a bit. And sometimes your gut will be wrong. Like sometimes it may like maybe you get $1 million and customers right on the other side of this deal and they were coming next month and you pivoted. But usually that's not the case. If anything, people will go way too long. If anything, they should do it way earlier. At least we should have.
Adam, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, you mentioned how building the right team is one of the most important parts of building a startup. And you talked about being able to just basically sell a product that barely exists. How do you go about building that right team, and like how do you know when to do it, especially when you have the day one students?
There's a lot of ways to probably build a good team, but like if you have people that have complementary skills to you, like it's super helpful. Like I can't write any code, so like I'm not gonna start a software company without having some partner that can write code. Like I would say between like me, Ben, and Rick, like Rick is a designer by trade, Ben's an engineer. I'm like I said, not a good salesperson. Like you don't need a customer support person day one. But like somebody like at least willing to do the things that are in different areas and kind of spread out that work among the team that doesn't exist is like is helpful. But like I would say like if you've worked with somebody before and they're awesome, like you should try to convince them to work on your startup with you. So like there's no better indicator that somebody is going to be a good part of the team than if you've worked with them before and they were a great part of the team then. Now there can be a lot of factors of that. Like if you worked with them at a 10,000 person company and they were a great employee at a 10,000 person company, they may not have the right skill set for a 2-person team. But if you know that your skills complement each other and they're willing to put in, the time and effort and, go through ups and downs, then that's great. But like, if you work with people that were great before, they're probably still great. So if you can work with people that you've worked with again, I would suggest doing that. Like a lot of the people that we work with today are familiar faces from before. And how do you know? When to bring people on the team? I don't know. Like usually it's not. Usually I would say sooner is better than later. Like if you're trying to, like if you're hiring a salesperson, the salesperson should pay for themselves at least in the not so distant future. You're just going to go faster with people if they really have complementary skill sets to you. Like if you didn't have somebody who's a designer and you bring on a designer, you will be shocked in the first week how much more shit gets done. Same thing with engineers, same thing with salespeople, same thing with marketing people. Like the reality is if you're a 3-person team, you're also like wearing other hats and doing this other stuff. So like having somebody that comes in and can help you out is better. And you honestly, like, even if they come in and you got to spend money on a salary for them, and like the company's not going to work out, like you actually just find out faster, because you're going to have somebody dedicated to building the product or marketing the product or whatever. So if it's going to work out, you'll find out faster. And generally, if it's not going to work out, you'll find out faster because you run out of money. So in general, I would say like there's a lot of caveats to that in general, but like in general, I would say like sooner is better than later.
Should I see your hand up?
It's kind of a similar question in the sense of that might be out in true essence, but being when to scale, I've seen a lot of her. Talked to a lot of founders that have a specific skill set and they end up, even if they're doing well, it's just due to the skill set that they're good at and not actually scaling. And so, my question was, when to start working on, like, on a business goddess or business?
Yeah.
As it has. How big was the team that you sold?
we were only 2 people when we sold the first company. So we had a couple people come on and help us on a contract basis, but it was just Ben and I when we sold the first company. But in terms of like knowing when to work on the business versus in the business, I think like even at 50 people, I don't know the answer, because I think even at 50 people, like we're working in the business every day. Like, you know, earlier today, I'm setting up interviews, like our HR person's out. So like I'm doing phone screens and things like that like you potentially have somebody who like does that full time eventually. So there's kind of like, you just, for a long time anyway, and I don't know when the answer is, at least for me personally, it's like, I always say that like, I'll do a crappy job of this job before we hire somebody who can like do a good job at it. So I think like that kind of happens a lot. And like the nice thing is like, at least for a period of time, like if the more in the weeds you are, the better pulse you have on what's going on. And like you will eventually just not be able to do everything or like manage every person or whatever. And so I do think there's a bit of being like, you got to be in the business at least in some way, doing hands-on work for probably a long period of time. And it depends what your role is. Like I probably do more, I'd call it individual contributor work than say like Rick does at this point, because he's spending more time on vision and building a team and that sort of thing. And a lot of the operations stuff that happens behind the house or behind the scenes will be things that like I need to do. Like until a few months ago, I'm chasing down individuals for people that are past due on bills and that sort of thing. So like it looks a little different depending on who you are on the team too. So I don't know exactly when that is, but I think, you know, is a challenging thing. But at a certain point, like you just need to, like, I think if you do the job before you hire somebody for it, like you're gonna have a better sense of what you're even looking for. So much early on is like, I don't even know, like we've done a number of interviews where we're like, I don't know what I want in this role, but I will know it when I see it. And the reason you kind of know it when you see it is because like you had to do the job yourself. So I don't have a great answer for you other than like, when it starts like hitting a breaking point, like you'll kind of know, like, man, I'm just like really behind on all of this stuff that needs to get done. I should probably hire somebody to like help me for that. But like, you can kind of let it burn for a little bit, but at a certain point, you're like, we got to fix this.
Well, thank you so much. We are at our time, but it has been awesome to have you with us. As kind of a final concluding question and thought in this, you know, Scale Omaha group startup ecosystem in Omaha, can you share a little bit about what you would like to see out of this community?
I would love to see more people start companies. I think it's awesome. I think it's like, there's like, it's really easy to like judge people for like starting companies and they fail or whatever. Like I said, it's really hard. And I think the only way that you have more successes and more that sort of thing is like you have more people try. Like it is a little bit of a numbers game. And I think if you're in the community and there's a way to help someone else out, like you should figure out a way to do that, whether that's help them find their first customers or help them find employees or people that are complementary to them or whatever. Like if there's a way to help you out, then that's like, try to do that. Now that's not, you can't do everything for everybody. But if you see someone else working on a project, like if there's a way you can help out, I would challenge you to figure out a way to help out. And I would love to see more people start companies and help each other out. Like we're problem solvers. Like,
yeah,
what problem is your company working on? Like I might be able to help with that, or I might know somebody who can help you. Like if you can figure out a way to help people out, that'd be awesome. So, and that never goes away. Like we should, whether it's a 1,000-person company or a 1-person company who's just trying to go up traffic, helping each other out is the only, like you always kind of need some help.
Yeah.
People need help.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate everything that you're sharing here. Wonderful.